All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm so glad that you all came out today. I hope you've had a wonderful time at the rest of the AMCOA Annual Assessment Conference today. My name is Matt Salamone. I'm an Associate Professor of Mathematics at Bridgewater State. I'm currently the chair of our department, and I've been involved in work around quantitative literacy and assessment for a number of years. I, with some faculty colleagues, launched an initiative at Bridgewater called QUAC, Quantity Across the Curriculum, which was intended as a faculty development endeavor, but also a sort of a curriculum development and faculty support model for faculty members in any discipline who are teaching about quantitative content in their courses, whether it's in the math classroom or more especially outside the math classroom. And my goal for our session today is to be something a little bit different. I've run a workshop at this conference for the past 3 or 4 years straight. And it's been sort of a whirlwind comprehensive workshop of what is quantitative literacy, what does it look like in the disciplines, what are the ways that we can assess it, and so on and so forth. And we're at a moment right now in our national conversation and in the conversations we're having on our campuses and in our departments. We're at a moment right now of real opportunity to sort of strike out for equity and strike out for racial justice. And what I didn't want this workshop to be was my same presentation from the past 3 or 4 years with a little bit of information stapled into it about equity and racial justice. So I don't want that to be what this is today. I'm hoping it can be something different, something fresh that we can do together. Because the fact is, in all matters of equity and racial justice and anti-racism that we're working on right now, individually and collectively as faculty members and as institutions, we are all still figuring all this stuff out along the way. So I certainly am not in a position to claim expertise or really even claim leadership about this. I'm still learning. And so what I'm hoping to be able to do with this group is to draw on the wisdom of the whole room, to really think about what are the ways in which quantitative literacy poses a particular opportunity on our campuses to work towards a more equitable and a more just educational experience for our students, particularly for our students of color. And then by extension, what are the ways that quantitative literacy can work for equity in the larger community beyond our campuses as well. So the rough outline for what I'm hoping we can accomplish over the next hour and 15 minutes or so is that I'd like for us to really have, again, a different experience of one of these kinds of workshops. So what we'll do is I want to give you a chance to break out into some small groups, get to know one another a little bit, and get ready to do some collaborative work today. And the collaborative work that I have in mind is that I'm going to provide us first with sort of some really basic ideas about how to conceptualize quantitative literacy and numeracy inside of a justice-oriented framework, to really make that justice agenda for quantitative literacy. And then have us in small groups really do the detail-oriented work of taking a look at a piece of a fictitious syllabus and a fictitious assignment, which is designed around quantitative ideas, and try to bring some of these equity and justice lenses toward a revision of that assignment and that syllabus. So I don't know if you've had this experience as an assessment professional. I'm not an assessment professional, but I feel like I've had this experience too, where I get a faculty member's assignment and I look at it and I say, wow, don't I wish that I could go in and just change everything about this assignment. And so this is an opportunity for us to do just that, and to do that with a lens toward sort of re-envisioning this syllabus, this fictitious syllabus, this fictitious assignment, re-envisioning how it could be an assignment that promotes racial justice, that promotes equity, and promotes quantitative literacy as a way to get to those ends. So that's the vision and the hope that I have for today, and we'll see if it works. So admittedly, it's very different and very active, I hope. So I hope we can use this as a way to conclude the workshop with something quite engaging today. All right, thanks for those introductions. It looks from this word cloud that you created here that you all came very prepared to anticipate the discussion that I'm hoping that we'll have. Right? The question I posed to you was, why do you think that numeracy counts as a racial justice and equity matter? And so some of the themes that are coming out of what you contributed, right, are that that numeracy is a skill that can empower underserved populations, right? That those populations have been minoritized, right? And that has been an active process in which mathematics and numeracy has at times served as a tool of that minoritization. And so reclaiming that for all of our students can be a way to redress racial injustice, right? And empowering our students with these not just skills, but practices and understandings of sort of how numeracy functions in society and in politics and in ideology and in culture, I think is how we get to, one of the ways we get to numeracy as a justice matter. So I want to continue just as we often do in these workshops, just by getting some terms down on the table. First and foremost of which, of course, is quantitative literacy. So quantitative literacy is typically thought of as, by the AAC&U, a habit of mind, a competency, and a comfort in working with numerical data. And so that's how their value rubric puts it. And that's kind of a big pill to swallow because it has these three big aspects to it, right? There's the competency, which is what I think a lot of our instructors sort of think about most, is how do I know a student is quantitatively literate? Well, I can see them doing correct calculations, right? And that's certainly one piece of the puzzle. But the comfort piece is also big, right? We want students not just to do quantitative literacy, but to want to do quantitative literacy. They need to be comfortable enough in themselves and in their skills and their practices, and comfortable enough that those practices have value in the social and political and cultural context around them, that they're comfortable enough to activate those skills. And then last and certainly not least is we want these skills to become a habit of mind. We don't want to be standing over our students' shoulders for the rest of their lives as their college instructor saying, hey, you could do a data analysis here. Or, hey, actually, that thing that the politician said in the debate actually was a misleading use of statistics, right? We want them to be in the habit themselves of bringing these skills to bear in their everyday life. So that's how the AAC&U puts it. But I think there's a piece of the puzzle that the AAC&U framing doesn't necessarily do justice to, and that's the fact that quantitative literacy is not just a set of skills, it's a practice. And if we turn our focus to QL and numeracy as a practice, then we can see numeracy activity, and I saw this arising in your introductory discussions, as a cultural, historical, and political set of practices, right? It's situated in all those different contexts and the ways that those contexts intersect in the lives of our students, right? Yasukawa and others have this edited collection called Numeracy as Social Practice, in which they sort of position numeracy as inherently ideological in nature. And that is not a familiar way to think about what numeracy is for a lot of folks. And maybe it's not familiar for you, in which case, great. That's why we're here, in part, right? And one of the ways to expose that difference in understanding is just to clearly differentiate between what we mean by school mathematics on the one hand and what we mean by numeracy on the other hand. School mathematics, as we think of the math courses that students typically encounter in the K-16 curriculum, involves sort of this disciplinary mindset that mathematicians like myself were acculturated into, right? Which is that we're always reaching for higher levels of abstraction in our understanding. We very often try to stake claims on objective realities, right? 2 plus 2 is always equal to 4, regardless of the context in which it appears, right? And school mathematics really sort of prides itself on an independence of context, right? That it doesn't matter, if we have 2 apples or if we have 2 boxes or if we have 2 societies. If we add those 2's together, we're always going to get 4's regardless of what the context of those 2's happens to be, right? And that's what the shape that school math takes. Numeracy, on the other hand, turns a lot of those ideas inside out and says, well, rather than reaching up for higher levels of abstraction, we want to reach out for broader domains of application for these skills. And you want to be able to attend not to the claims to objective reality that school math often comes saddled with, but to the subjective choices that we as the agents of mathematical and numerical reasoning make along the way between asking a question and addressing a question. All of the various sort of human limitations and choices and biases that get encoded in that process, those matter when we're doing numeracy. And that numeracy, therefore, cannot be separated from the contexts, the cultural, historical, political, ideological context, the milieus in which it arises. So numeracy, I like to call it, has an urgency of context to it, as opposed to school math, which is transcendent of context. So with that sort of definition of quantitative literacy on the table, I also want us, in our moment generally, and in the moments that we have together today, to think about how an anti-racist framework of quantitative literacy might look. And to get those definitions on the table, we're thinking of racism here not as a collection of sort of individually held and individually expressed biases or beliefs, but really more of a what Ibram Kendi calls a marriage of policies and ideas that happens in a broader context in society, even a society of people who aren't individually themselves racially prejudiced or biased, can still produce this marriage of policies and ideas that produces and normalizes inequalities between racial groups, right? So anything that creates and sustains and, worse yet, justifies these inequities between white individuals and individuals of color in our society, we call those collection of happenings racism, right? And in Kendi's framework, anti-racism then is the process of locating and trying to confront and to redress those problems, not locating those problems in individual people or individual groups of people, but locating those problems as part of larger structures of policy and power that operate in our society. So that's the big overarching lens with which I want us to think about these problems today. Because mathematics in particular and numeracy and statistics in sort of more generality operate in society and in culture in ways that have historically contributed to racial inequities. And in our own small ways in higher education, I want us to be thinking today about how to be anti-racist in that sense, to identify what are some of the ways in which our current structures of mathematics and quantitative literacy are contributing to racism and ways in which we can redress that in our practices, in our teaching, in our own classrooms, on our campuses, in our institutions, with our communities of stakeholders beyond our universities' walls. So, what I would like for us to do next is to familiarize ourselves with one lens through which we can view this problem. So we're going to go back into the breakout groups that we started today's session with. Give or take, I think we had a couple people join, a couple people leave, so I may have to shuffle them a little bit. But each of your groups is going to get a reading on a single lens through which we can view this problem. And the question is, what is it that might make a quantitative assignment or a quantitative syllabus a missed opportunity for racial justice? So you read about one lens through which we can view this problem, and then I'm going to invite you to annotate this fictitious syllabus and assignment prompt that I've designed just for the purposes of creating a straw person to beat on in today's assignment. So you'll collaboratively annotate, figure out what are some places where using our lens on this problem we have identified, hey, here are some opportunities or here are some problematic pieces to how this assignment in the syllabus has been designed that could be used as footholds to do a revision of it, which is going to be then the second part of our process. So when we get back into the breakout rooms, I'm going to be sharing your room an individual link toward a short reading or short video to consume, and then a link to annotate this shared document together. And that's what we're going to take about 20 or 25 minutes in that breakout room. So it should be plenty of time for you and your group partners to sink your teeth into this, looking at the problem through this lens. So what you had the opportunity to do in your rooms was examine the question about equity and racial justice in a quantitative literacy assignment and syllabus through one of three lenses, depending on which group that you were in. The first group, group one, had the lens that I call school mathematics as exclusion. And so in that group, they looked a little bit at the effect that race has historically had in a student's math education, particularly through K-12. And saw a video from something called the Algebra Project, which is a classic resource in my discipline for sort of looking at how to bring educational equity and racial justice to the table in ensuring that all students have access to high quality mathematics education up through the grades, K through 16. So thinking about the role of mathematics per se in ensuring or limiting access to students' educational opportunities in high school and college was the lens that Group 1 was looking at. Group 2 is looking through a lens I call Big Data as Oppression. This is there's a lot of great writing and articles and books and even movies and stuff about this these days, because this is a big topic, because big data is a big deal. And so that group looked at a couple of resources about how big data, machine learning, and algorithmic analysis can incorporate the biases and encode the prejudices and the racial inequities of the people who create it, right? Wittingly or unwittingly. Can that ghost be removed from the machine? It's one of my favorite little catchy titles. And so that group was looking at this syllabus and this assignment through the lens of, well, how are we allowing automated processes and data to substitute for processes that are probably better left as subjective and human processes, and can that uphold racial inequality? And the third lens is the lens I call numeracy as liberation, to kind of look at the effects that being a numerate individual in society and having quantitative literacy skills can really help students to have agency in their education, agency in their navigation of various sort of political and power structures around them, and agency in their everyday lives. So agency is the watchword for that third group. So hopefully you had, not hopefully, I know you did, because I was listening in on all your breakout groups. I know that you all had the opportunity to really get into, get your hands dirty with these questions and look at this fictitious assignment and syllabus that I provided for you. So now, the rest of our time together, I want to take 15 or maybe a little more than 15 minutes to get back into a separate set of groups. So in this new group, we're going to have folks from each one of the original breakouts in it. So there'll be expertise on each of these three lenses. And what I want for you to do in these groups is I'm going to supply you with a Google Doc copy of this syllabus and this assignment. And I want you to just go to town on it. Take the issues that you surfaced in the first parts of the discussion and use those issues that you highlighted to revise. So how would this syllabus look if we could revise it through a lens of equity and racial justice, through the three lenses that you've already had an opportunity to bring to bear on this question? So when we get back into the breakout groups, I'm going to share a Google Doc link with a copy of this that is editable. And what I'd like for you to do is to quickly, because we don't have a ton of time, take the opportunity to debrief the others in your room about your lens. So what issues did you talk about? What related to the original syllabus, original assignment that you spotted because you were using your particular lens? And then use the opportunity as a group to make that assignment into what you wish it had been in the first place in this dimension. Thank you all for the great work that you did in your groups today, kind of doing an equity audit in a way. On a fictitious syllabus and a fictitious assignment in a quantitative literacy setting, to look at the ways in which we can mitigate against the uses of school mathematics as an exclusionary device in our programs, the uses of big data and algorithms and machine learning as a tool of upholding oppression and racial inequity, and really try and promote student agency and numeracy as a liberation practice, right? So as I look through some of the revisions and the comments, people are picking up on some of the little things, like holding your office hours at a cafe in town. Things like, well, let's think about what is the appropriate prerequisite for this course, and is that creating a mathematical barrier that's not necessary for the course and that can disadvantage students who might not have the same kinds of access to mathematics education. Even just using a Yahoo email address instead of your institutional email address. But also, access to technology and resources like graphing calculators, the uses of automated artificially intelligent proctoring software and its effects on racial inequity. The ways that questions are posed in our assignments can be written in using framings that are problematic. And we can be asking students to do things like make unequivocal predictions and draw causal influences that also can contribute to racial inequity. So thank you all for the work that you did. I hope that this helps you to see back on your campuses and working with your faculty colleagues how we can use quantitative literacy and numeracy education as a tool for equity in our educational programs. I will be sharing out the video of this presentation, so that doesn't include your work in the breakouts, but it includes the slides that you're seeing here through my Zoom camera, as well as a list of all these resources. I'm going to share those out with our organizer for the conference to forward on to you afterwards.